Hello, welcome to this lesson. So this is 2.8 Population Dynamics 2, so it's the second lesson on our population dynamics. The first thing that we're going to look at is predator-prey population relationships, and then we'll look at artificial population control. So the first thing we're going to look at is predator-prey relationships. There are lots of different types of relationships in ecology. You have predator-prey, you also have mutualistic, where both benefit, and you have parasitic, which is where one benefits at the expense of the other. You also have commensalism, where one doesn't appear to benefit and the other does. So looking at predator-prey populations, we have a classic example, which is wolves and deer. So that's what we're going to look at first. We're going to start off with drawing some axes so we can show a population changing over time. So this is time, and this is population. So we're going to have a herbivore. So this is going to be a deer species. And its population increases as there is a limited, not very many limiting factors. It's not reached its carrying capacity yet, and it will continue to go up and up and up until it exceeds its carrying capacity, and then it will start to decline because there'll be increased competition for things like food. So shortages of food causing the population to decline. The other thing that will happen is as the population of a prey species increases, the population of a predator species that relies on it for food will also increase. So down here we've got a red line, and this is standing in for our wolves. Now this starts much lower down because there's going to be less wolves than there are deer, and it will peak after the peak in the deer population. So if I just label those just to make it nice and clear, deer and wolves. And this peak means that the population of wolves has increased to such a point that they're having a detrimental effect on the population of deer. So there's increased predation. And what this will cause to happen is this population will decrease in the deer population because there's less food available. The number of wolves will decrease as well. So we see that we have less food equals decreased population, pot for population. Because the population in wolves has decreased, there's less pressure on the deer population, and it will start to increase again. And again, it will reach a peak, a lack of food, and an increase in predators will cause that population to then decrease again, and our population of wolves will decrease in response to it. There is always a lag between the peak of the prey species and the peak of the predator species because there's a time delay between the two. And both of these will therefore hover around the carrying capacity of the environment. So this is our carrying capacity for our deer. And this can be our carrying capacity for our wolves. And we see this happen time and time again throughout ecology. The famous example where there was some really solid data where they established this sort of relationship was lynx and hares in North America. So that's a nice bit of history for you. The next thing we're going to look at is artificial population control. Now, there's a couple of instances when we might need artificial control, and it's usually because there's been some sort of upset to natural processes, and I'll explain that a bit more in a minute, or death rates are exceeding birth rates. And this will obviously result in a population decline. And if there's been an upset to natural processes, then humanity might need to step in and fulfill some of the roles that would normally be undertaken by a fully functioning community of species. So, to regulate populations, one of the things we might do is increase the population through captive breeding. So captive breeding is where we breed species in captivity, so in a sort of zoo or in a game reserve, and then we will release them back into the wild when it's safe to do so. An example of this is our friendly rhino here. So it's being poached at a greater rate than it can breed because it's a K-selected species. So in response, we captive breed them so we have a safe population that we can reintroduce with. The next reason why we might want to do some sort of population control is because we have a non-indigenous species introduced. This is what otherwise might be called an alien species or an invasive species. And this will act to reduce native species populations, and there won't be any control or regulation because it's an invasive species, so there's no natural process to control it. So it might reduce native species because it is a predator, or it might be a competitor, or it might carry diseases, so it's a disease vector. And the example we have here, there's loads of examples because humans like to do this, but this is a mink. So this is a North American species that was introduced into the UK for fur farming. They were released into the UK by activists and fur farms just sort of releasing them. And they breed in the wild, and they have really major negative impacts on the population of water voles, which have not have not evolved to cope with the particular predation pressures that mink can exert because they're very small, semi-aquatic hunters, which are actually able to predate water voles, whereas not very many native species can. And the last one is lack of predation. So an indigenous or a native predator is removed, and this might be an apex predator, or it might be sort of a mid-level predator, so it could be wolves or lynx, which is sort of a smallish wild cat thing. If these are removed, there's no control of herbivores, which can then exceed their carrying capacity, and this will result in ecological damage. And the example you have here is in Yellowstone National Park. So this is before wolves were reintroduced, and this is after wolves were reintroduced. So you can see here you have loads of this elk, which is a large deer species. These congregate in the low areas of the Yellowstone National Park. They overgraze. There's no recruitment to the forests. You have nothing predating coyotes, so these increase in numbers. The rivers are become very silty because there's a lot of erosion. Once wolves were introduced, these prevented deer from congregating in these lowland areas. It drove them up the sides of the mountains. They would still visit these areas, but they wouldn't hang around too long. It allowed willows to regenerate on the banks to prevent sedimentation. You had beavers that were able to find enough food, so they colonize. Um, and this promoted a much more biodiverse and sustainable ecosystem. Okay, so thank you very much.